For the second half of our fourth session. And as I said before, I won't go into too much more detail, but this is a presentation I would, especially if you guys don't have experience in the human resources side, pay attention. It's tough to fit into, impossible to fit all of human resources into a period like this, into an hour. But if you guys have questions, Cheryl will definitely be able to answer them. Whether it's about entrepreneurship in general, as I said, she's an entrepreneur. She's owned 2 businesses. She's worked in industry. She's been an instructor at the college level, university. And as you can see, she has more letters behind her name than I really know. So make sure that you take her information and really run with it. Cheryl.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, thank you. So what I want to do is I want to start by telling you a story. And I thought this was the coolest thing. So there's this hotel in Japan. I don't know if you've been to Japan or not. It's a very cool country. And it's completely automated. So you go in the front door and there's a robot that greets you and you check in and somehow your bags get to your room and somehow your room gets cleaned and somehow you get room service and somehow the concierge tells you what cool things there are to do in Japan. And there's no people. And so they were interviewing the person who built this hotel. And they said, wow, this is really cool. And of course, it's very expensive to stay there. And they said, yeah, it's a 4-star hotel. And I thought, oh, why? Gee, that's weird. It's only a 4-star hotel. Why?
There's no people.
There's no people. And so the hotel owner said, you can't have a 5-star hotel if you don't have any staff. Because people are what give you your competitive advantage. And that's the difference between 4 and 5 stars. And I thought that was a very, obviously obvious, but interesting way to consider your staff. So some of you are probably starting your businesses in your basement or in your house, and you're not going to have staff, but eventually you're going to have employees. And you always need to remember that for your customer, your employee is you. That's the face of your business. And so it's very important to make sure that you make proper investments in who it is that you're going to be hiring. So with that, I want you to think about your employees the same way you think about getting married. So some of you have probably been married, some of you have probably been married more than once, and there's lots of value in that lesson. So when you have employees, it's just like picking a spouse, because you are essentially going to be married to this person. And the challenge is when you marry somebody, probably you go on some dates, and maybe this goes on for a while, and you court them, and you meet their family, and you find out a little bit about them, and you do this over a long period of time. But when you marry a staff, you do that in a very short period of time. So maybe it's a 40-minute interview, maybe it's a couple of references, maybe it's one sheet of paper that's a resume. And so you're making a pretty big decision based on very limited information. So in order to make sure that you do the best job you can of picking your employees, there are some things that you can do to help yourself. Now, HR is a very old discipline. It's been around for a long time. It borrows from other areas. And so you don't have to create all of this stuff on your own. There's lots of really good resources out there. And the first one I want to draw your attention to is this handout that says hrcouncil.ca. So the HR Council is a free resource, and they have all kinds of templates and information that you can access. And one of the first things that you're going to need to do if you have employees is you're going to have to tell them what to do. People will do what you ask them to do, but they have to know what that is. And some of you have had jobs before, and how many of you have worked in jobs where you've never seen a job description? So how did you know what to do?
Create a list.
You make a list. How do you know what to do? Wouldn't it be efficient if somebody said, here, this is what you're expected to do, and this is what a good job looks like, now go and do that? Because most of us, if we're told what a good job looks like, we're going to do that job. So this template is sort of one of the very first things that you can use to create a job description. And what it causes you to do as well is to think about the kind of person that you want and the kind of tasks that they need to be doing. And then once you know what it is that they have to do, then you can start thinking about the kind of skills that they're going to need to have in order to do that job. So this is the first thing that I would say every company needs to have for all potential employees is a job description. So take that away with you. Now, what happens if you pick the wrong partner, the wrong spouse? What are your options? You can fire them. Sorry? Yeah, you can do that too. What else can you do? You're gonna get a divorce, right? Okay, so if you get a divorce, how much does a divorce cost? It costs lots. And if you hire the wrong employee, you have to divorce that employee. And that's also very expensive. So there's lots of industry evidence to show what that costs. And on average, it costs about $25,000 for a bad hiring decision, which is about the same cost as, I suppose, a wicked divorce would be. But there are ways that you can mitigate that and ways that you can reduce that. And so some of the things that you do is you look out and you say, okay, well, what have other companies done? Where have they screwed up? And how can I learn from those mistakes? So with this, the reason, or in addition to the cost, that $25,000 of a bad hire, there are all kinds of other costs. So lost worker productivity. You're paying someone to do a job and they're not doing anything for you. Or they're doing less than what the value is that it's costing. If you have to hire someone else, then you're going to have to pay recruiting costs, training costs. Do you have any idea what it costs to take an ad out in the Lethbridge Herald in the careers section? Maybe a decent 1/8 of a page ad. Any idea what that costs? Who knows? $500? It's more than that. It's about $1,400. So if you want to take out an ad in the Globe and Mail, because you know you have a job where you want to do a wider search, you're going to pay about $8,000.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so I know companies that have taken out ads in the Globe and Mail. Actually, I only know one company. It sounds better if I multiply. And they took out this ad and they didn't have one single applicant. Can you imagine? You may as well drive down Mayor McGrath Drive and throw your money out the window. So it's very expensive to recruit. You can hire a professional search firm to help you if you're hiring employees. And you know, it depends on the position, but if it's a mid-level kind of managerial position, you're looking at paying about 30% of salary. So if the job that you're hiring for is a $60,000 a year job, it's going to cost you $20,000 to have an executive search firm hire that person for you. That's a lot of money. And one of the guarantees they give you is that if that person doesn't work out, you know, then they'll do the search for you again. So I suppose there's some consolation in that, but it's not cheap to hire a professional agency to help you find staff. There's also the idea of, you know, one bad apple spoils the barrel. When you have negative employees, that spreads like wildfire, and you get low morale, and you get lots of adversary. You get negative kinds of behavior. You get all kinds of workplace deviant behaviors. And people start doing things at your work in your company that are not productive. In fact, you've all heard of shoplifting. If you have a business, you need to be worried about shoplifting. More companies lose money from employee theft than they do from shoplifting. And it's not the person who's, you know, kind of loading up their backpack and going out the door. It's all these behaviors that your employees will tend to rationalize. Well, I don't get paid enough, so therefore I'm just going to take all the office supplies home for my kids back to school, because, you know, or I don't, you know, so-and-so is getting a better shift schedule than I am, so therefore I'm just going to pad my expense account. So people rationalize their bad behavior, and all of those things end up costing your company money. And those come from bad hiring decisions. So you want to make sure you can avoid those if possible. So how do you end up with these bad people in the first place? How many of you have worked with an idiot? Okay. How did that happen?
Desperation.
Desperation? So they just needed a body?
Not enough people to fill the jobs, so they just hired whoever walked in the door.
Okay. Why else? They're related, yeah, nepotism, yeah. Yeah, not too much about that.
Friend of the boss.
Sorry?
Friend of the boss.
Friend of the boss, okay. Yeah, so there's lots of reasons that companies make bad hiring decision. And the one you said about, you know what, we needed a body, that's the number one reason, is that there is a shortage of workers. And if you need to have a worker, you need a body standing there, then you're tempted just to let, you know, the first breathing warm person be that person. But that can be very detrimental to your company. And if you are an employer of choice, if you're a good employer, if you're a good boss, then people are going to come to you and they're going to stay working for you, and you don't have this problem. So the two businesses that I owned an employment agency, and we had about 6 or 8 staff. So it was a professional kind of office environment, and we had different people that worked there. And then I also owned a grocer, which is like retail. And my claim to fame is in both of those businesses, I had 0 turnover. People did not quit. They loved working for me, and I did a good job of hiring people. So I went out and hand-picked the people that I wanted to work in my businesses, and was very purposeful about what that was going to look like and who I wanted to have there. And as a result, had fantastic staff. And in the employment agency, of course, you have to pay people a professional wage, but in retail, I mean, turnover in retail is pretty common, and it doesn't pay very well, and that wasn't a problem. So I don't buy this argument that, you know, we just need a warm body. Because if you're a good employer, people will come to you, they'll want to work for you, and they're not going to be leaving.
We had a question from online,
Yeah.
And specifically talking about your business. What was your secret in keeping the fantastic staff?
There's lots of things you can do. So money is not a motivator. So you have to pay people enough money to kind of take it off the table. You have to pay them a fair wage, but you can never pay people enough to motivate them. Money is more of a hygiene. So, and there's lots of evidence, you know, in the research that shows you that if you do pay people more, you have to pay people a significant amount more, as much as 30% more, in order for it to have meaning. And for those of you that have gotten a raise, how many of you have gotten a raise over your careers? And how long did it take you to absorb that raise? Yeah, like a month? It's like, oh, if I just made, you know, 5% more money, and then you make 5% more money, and then the next month you're like, well, gee, if I could just make 5% more money, right? Like it's easy to absorb that. So what I always try to do is I try to look for incentives to keep people happy that isn't necessarily financial. Because the number one reason people quit their job is lack of recognition. So I make a point of telling staff what they're doing, that they're doing it well, and that I'm grateful for what they're doing. So it's about finding genuine opportunity to say, hey, you know what? I saw that you had to deal with that cranky customer and you handled that really well. I probably would have, you know, yelled at them or something, and thanks for doing that for me. Other things you can do is in the professional business, we would have mental health days. So at the beginning of every month, we'd sit down as a team and we'd say, okay, everybody gets 1 day off a month with pay. So that's your day to go to the doctor, you know, sleep in, volunteer at your kid's school, whatever you want to do. And who's going to take what day when. And then we would sort of sort out who got to take what day off. And people never phoned in sick. Because they knew they got this day off. In fact, I had an employee once calling me from the hospital sobbing because she was getting her appendix out and she wasn't going to be able to come to work, but she would try. And, so when you treat people well, don't expect your employees to do anything that you're not willing to do. When we had the grocer, I would wash the floor. I'd say, hey, you want to wash the floor or count the money? Who doesn't want to count the money, right? So usually I was the one washing the floor. But you do those, you treat people really well, how you want to be treated, and they will be very loyal to you. So there's all kinds of things you can do. The other thing, the 21% button up here, this is talking about applications that people give to you or resumes that they give to you. And most people lie on the resume. What do you think the number is? What percentage of people lie on the resume? 100%. No, it's not 90. Depends what you read, but it's between 40 and 60%. And what do you think they usually lie about? Top 3 things they lie about. Their skills,
Education.
their education,
Employment record.
and their employment record. So they say that they worked somewhere for a longer period of time than they actually did. They took a few courses at the university and then they put down that they have a degree. They embellish the job that they're doing. They give themselves a new job title. So those are things that people do because you know what? It's a game trying to apply for work and looking for that advantage. And it's your job as the employer to suss that out. Because if you hire somebody, and let's say you're working in a company that deals with vulnerable populations, maybe deal with children or persons with disabilities or something, and you've hired someone that has a criminal record, that is your problem. And you are going to be in trouble for that. So as an employer, you have a huge fiduciary duty to make sure that you've done some fact checking. So if you have, if you're asking for a degree, it's okay to ask for a transcript. It's okay to ask for letters of reference. And speaking of references, the last point up there, the 11%, a lot of companies don't call references, which I think is bizarre. There's this really good book, it's called The Gift of Fear. I don't know if you've read it or not. If you're looking for a good book to read, it's a pretty good book. It's written by this guy, his name's Gavin de Becker, and his job is to go around and he gets hired by actresses and actors and rich and famous people, and his job is to see whether or not people who are making threats against them are actually going to act on those threats. So that he makes predictions about that. And he says in his book that in every case of stalking, at an employer, every single case that he's been called in to assist with, the employer did not check references. So that's an easy thing to do, is to call and check a reference. So I would encourage you as business owners, if you're going to hire staff, check people's references and make it meaningful. Sometimes by the time we get to the reference checking stage, we've got this problem called escalation of commitment. It's like getting married, right? So when you're standing at the altar, you're probably not going to say no. The time to say no was before you got to the altar. So, once people are checking references, I've had people call me for references and I'm trying to tell them this is not a good hire and they're not listening to me. Okay, so what you'd say then is that this person was able to take some initiative. No, I didn't say that. What I said was that this person would follow direction if you gave them really clear, concise instructions. Oh, okay, so they're really good at following directions then and they can do things on their own. No, that is not what I said. But clearly you want to hire this person, so go ahead and make that mistake. So you want to make sure that you're not just listening and trying to just solidify it like it's just a step I have to go through. Yes.
So in that example, were you calling, or were they calling previous employers, or were they calling like the references that people would list on the?
They were calling the
resume?
references people would list. And you'd be surprised what people will say about you. Yes. Oh, yeah.
It was a question kind of in relation to this. So as a former employer, for example, as a reference, what are you not allowed to disclose?
Okay, that's a myth that a lot of people have, is that you're not allowed to say anything bad about your employees. Okay, that is absolutely not true. You can speak the truth. So if your employee was late, often phoning in sick, if they were unable to meet your performance standards, if you had sales quotas or something and they didn't meet those, you can disclose all of that information. But it's usually, the reason that doesn't get disclosed is often because the person doing the reference checking doesn't ask the right questions. So certainly you can say things that are negative about that person as long as they are truthful. Now, if you're an employer, one of the things that I tell employers to do is that in addition to accepting resumes, you should also have a standard one-page application form. And the reason for that is because it gets the information that you want to have. It just doesn't give you the information that the person wants to tell you. And it allows you to compare your candidates across the same criteria. And on the bottom of that one-page application form, the person signs it and says that this information is true, and that if it's not true, then that can be grounds for dismissal. And the other question you can ask on an application form is, can I contact your current employer or your past employers for references? And the person will say yes or no. Now, if they say no, you can't contact my current employer, that's not a big deal. Don't make that a red flag. Because a lot of people are out there looking for work. They want to change jobs, but they don't necessarily want their boss or their company to know that. So if someone says, no, you can't, don't worry about that. You should be respectful of that and not check that. But you do, when you ask and they say it's okay, then by signing that application form, that makes it very legitimate. The other thing too is going through this whole interview process with your new staff, you're going to have a gut reaction about people. Have you ever met somebody that you just didn't like? And you don't know why you don't like them, but you just don't like them. Okay? Don't hire that person. Okay? You trust your gut. Your instinct comes from your experience. And so something has happened in the past that has set you off about some characteristic that this person has. And you should listen to that. So you're smart people, you need to trust your gut instinct. I mean, you don't want to make that the only criteria where you line them up and they walk by and you think, yes, no, no, no. But certainly as one of the criteria, it's something that you'd want to consider. This slide talks about some red flags and the kinds of things that companies are doing, or companies have identified, as to what happens with these bad hires. So 63% of companies have said that, the person that we hired failed to produce the proper quality of work, maybe because they were, they didn't have the skills that they said they had, failure to work well with others, 62% bad attitude is pretty high. Immediate problems with attendance. If someone shows up late for their interview, I'm sorry, that's very bad. Okay? Your interview is your opportunity to really shine for your employer, and if they show up late, that's an indicator of a potential problem. And I don't know if you want to deal with that problem. Don't get caught up in this halo effect. I don't watch TV, but I know some of you watch TV. So who's a great actor? Who's like one of your favorite actors or actresses? Don't you know any? Come on, you must know some.
Al Pacino.
Al Pacino? Okay, so let's talk about Al Pacino. Is he a nice guy? Is he a nice guy? Al Pacino? Probably not. Is he funny? Does he have a good sense of humor? Is he kind? Is he generous? Is he thoughtful? So all these attributes you could probably think about, oh yeah, Al Pacino, I don't know the guy. I think he's in The Godfather with the horse head or something, right? Is that the guy? Okay. So I think he's a jerk, right? But I don't know anything about the guy. But that's the problem that we make, is we try to fill in the blanks and fill in the voids. And so we draw all these conclusions about people based on one or two attributes that we believe to be true or that maybe are true. And that's called halo effect. And so with your employees, you want to make sure that you don't have that problem. So you're looking at somebody and you think, oh, they're so good. They worked at this place that has, much better business practices than I have, and I want to be able to tap into that. And so then you overlook all this other stuff. And that will come back to harm you later on. So you want to make sure that you're not one of those, you're not overlooking things that people are demonstrating right away are bad.
I've been wondering for a while, is it not good for business to be too optimistic in general?
What do you
Like
mean by that?
in hiring employees, in how you think things are going to turn out in your projections? Like, is optimism going to get you into trouble?
No,
Okay.
no. Optimism is a good thing.
Okay.
You'll go way farther with your attitude than you will with any sort of skills that you have. So it's, you know, I really believe in this whole power of positive thinking. And so, you know what? My business is going to be great. And some business coaches will actually tell you that. So if someone says, how's business? Business is great. I'm very excited about my business. It's a wonderful business. Now, when I had the grocer, I was doing that in addition to doing several other things, and I was bloody exhausted all the time. Like, I was dragging my ass everywhere, and I had these, you know, one time I was at home trying to, if you're a lady and you wear mascara, you know when you wear mascara and you get that black kind of smudge under your eyes? I'm trying to wipe off the black mascara, and then I realized it's not mascara, it's bags. And so, but anybody who asks me, like, how is it owning a grocer? It's fantastic. And for the most part, it was fantastic. But, you know, I think like attracts like. And so if you're positive and you put that out there, then that's what you get back. It's like, oh, this is such a drag, my staff, they're all useless and lazy. Well, of course, then they're going to be useless and lazy, because that's what you expect. So I don't think you can ever be too positive.
Okay.
Okay, so back to this. Failure to meet deadlines. These are some big reasons that companies have identified employees give them grief. And now that you know this, you can screen for this. So you can ask questions during the interview about these kinds of attributes. You can go to the references and ask about these kinds of things. You can use this information for your benefit. Which takes us to the things that great companies do. And so there's 3 things that they do. And the first thing that they do is they have great interviews. So this handout that I gave you on practice questions for behavior descriptive interviews, these are the kinds of questions that you should be asking. Who can tell me the best predictor of future behavior? Past behavior. And that's what a behavior descriptive interview does. It says, tell me about a time when. So if I say, you know, tell me about a time when you had to deal with an upset customer and you didn't really have a good solution. Well, you know, I did this and this and that. Okay, very good. That's a very different response than saying, what would you do if you had an upset customer? Oh, I would, you know, do X, Y, and Z. But in reality, you would yell at them, because when I check your reference, that's what they told me you did. Okay? So situational type questions are questions where the candidate will tell you what they want to hear. And interviewing is a big game, and some people can play the game very well. And you'll get people who have resumes done, which are beautiful resumes and got all these skills, and then you'll call them up and you'll interview them and they'll come in for their interview. How many of you watch Sesame Street? You heard that song? One of these things is not like the other. Yeah. And you're looking at this resume and you're going, this doesn't make sense to me. And so during the process of the interview, you know, if you're not asking the right questions, you're only going to be told what you want to hear. So what do you like to do in your spare time? They're not going to say, oh, I lay around and watch TV and eat chips. Right? No one's going to tell you that. Okay? How many of you have ever been asked, what are your weaknesses? Okay, what do you say? I don't have any? Okay, what else do you say?
You're trying to come up with something that's weak but a strength at the same time.
Yeah, oh, I try too hard.
Yeah, I
I
work
care
too
too
much.
much. I work too hard. Those questions tell you nothing. Okay? So if I ask that question of a candidate and they tell me, oh, I work too hard, then the next question I ask them is, what are you doing about that? How are you fixing that problem? Oh, I'm not. Of course you're not, because you don't really have that problem. You're a liar. So you want to make sure that you're asking questions about characteristics that they have. So this is something that everybody who goes to business school, everybody who does a job search workshop, they all get this information. They expect you to ask these questions. So now you know what they know. And on the flip side of this sample questions, what you're doing is you're looking for attributes. So what's important in your business? Is it important that the person has customer service skills? Is it important that they can do conflict resolution? Is it important that they can manage their time? Like, what's important? And then you take that attribute and you ask questions about what they've done in their past that would indicate how they're going to be able to do this for you in the future. So these are examples of some things that you can use. And there's all kinds of online resources that give you good examples. There's pages and pages and pages of them. Yes, sir.
Are you allowed to like hire somebody like a trial period, like for a week? let's
Yeah,
say?
yeah, 30 days, or 90 days, 3 months. Yep, it's the
Oh, no,
trial
no,
period.
yeah, like
Yeah.
you say, oh, I'm gonna try you for a week. And then,
Yeah, and then this isn't working out. Yeah, you can say that. You actually have 3 months.
You don't have to have a legitimate reason for it.
No,
Let them go.
No.
and you shouldn't give them a reason. This isn't working out. Thank you. Off with you. Yeah, after 30 days, you have to give notice. And I mean, most of us don't want to give notice. Like if I said to, you know, this isn't really working out and I'm going to let you go in a week, what productivity am I going to get out of you for that week?
None.
Yeah, none, right? You're probably going to sabotage my whole business. So it usually involves me paying you for that week.
After 30 days.
90 days, 3 months, yeah. My head is not thinking very fast today because I'm quite sick, so I apologize for that. So interviewing is important. So plan out your interview. If possible, have a second party there so you can, you know, bounce off some ideas for them as to how you think that person did. And make sure that you're taking notes and you're gathering information that you can later verify with references. So you can call the reference and say, hey, you know, so-and-so said great things about your company, blah, 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 blah. What kinds of things would you say about them? If you could give them some career advice, what would you tell them? Okay? What was the one thing that you wish they had done better for you? Okay? Would you hire this person back? Okay, well, why haven't you then? Right? So remember, you only get that really small window of an interview and a reference check, and then you're married. So you want to try to make the best decision possible. So again, always check references. I think it's the third time I've told you. Something about I have to say it 7 times in order for you to remember, so you'll only hear it 4 more times. No. Just don't forget, references are the last step before you get to the altar. And so you want to make sure that you've done what you can. Yes, sir.
I know this might sound silly, but do people actually just put random names and numbers on their
Yes.
references? Like who would pick bad references for their future employer to call?
You'd be shocked. Yeah, people do that all the time. And the other thing they do, like I'm a professor, right? So I see, I mean, I've been teaching for 20 years. And so I have taught thousands of students, and they put me down as a reference. And I have no idea who this person is because I can't remember them from 6 years ago.
Don't you have to ask somebody to use them as a reference?
You should.
That's good practice.
And you should also tell them the kinds of work you're going to be looking for, and you should also tell them what you want to say about them. So probably you're going to get some calls about this, and if you could say these things about me, that would be great.
And
Yes.
I just to add to that, fake references. That happens quite a bit, and I remember one specifically when I was hiring someone gave me a fake reference, and the number looked really familiar. And I put it in my cell phone, and it was actually a friend of mine. And it was, and I didn't realize that he knew this person, and the name that he put down for reference was something completely different. So you need to be kind of really careful on that end as well.
Yeah, simple thing, right? And then, of course, did you hire that person?
No.
So it's actually, from employers that do check references, 1 in 5 screen someone out because of the reference. So that's about 20%. So it is a valuable thing to be doing. Okay, so you've gone through, you've done all your due diligence, you've hired, or you've got someone in mind, you've offered them a job, and now they're going to show up for work. So the first day that they come to work, how many of you have shown up for work first day and it's like they're surprised to see you? And how did you feel? Like, I'm so glad I work here? No, worse is you come to your first day of work and they give you a policy manual about this thick and put you in a corner and say, just read this. Let me know when you're done. Okay? That's a very bad orientation. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that your initial impression is a good one. How long does it take to form an initial impression of someone?
5 seconds.
3 seconds.
Yeah, not very long. Is it 30 seconds?
I think so.
Yeah, it's just a few seconds. So when I stood up here to talk to you, you had an impression of me. I'm sure it's much better now, but it's hard to change that initial impression. So if someone comes to work and they don't feel like this is a very professional organization, I'm just being stuck in the corner, nobody really knows I'm here, they're not very friendly. Those kinds of things stick with people. It takes a lot to undo that. So anticipate someone's arrival, make sure that, that others know that they're coming, and that you've got a plan for their day. Probably the best orientation I ever had was I showed up my first day of work somewhere. They already had my name on the door. They had business cards on my desk. They had this nice stack of brand new office supplies, and they had someone greet me and take me around and introduce me to people and arrange for all my orientations with like IT, so I would know how the phone worked and so on and so forth. I've had other jobs where I haven't had a phone for a month.
Oh my gosh.
Like, what are you supposed to do? Or a computer? Oh, I'm getting paid, I don't care. Seems right. But it really sets the tone for what kind of employee you're going to become. And it says to this person, you're not really that important to me. So having a really good first day on the job is important. And you can just base it on your own experience to know that that's actually true. Now there's going to be lots of information overload for new employees. So be sure to give them handouts or resources that they can refer back to later so that they remember what it is that you want them to do. The other thing is that if you have processes, like for instance when I had the grocer, you got to open the store. If you start early in your business the good habit of making records, then that'll save you lots of time later. Because you might be doing everything yourself right now, but once you have employees, then you can say, this is how you open the store. Here, I've written this down for you. And so then that saves you a lot of time later on. Okay, that's the end of the first part of the presentation. And the second part of the presentation is the legal stuff. So this is going to keep you out of jail. So you want to pay attention to that. Now some of you are going to try and save some money and you're going to hire contractors instead of employees. So you're going to pay people cash. Okay, that's a slippery slope, and I would caution you against that. So when you hire someone on a cash basis, so maybe you're paying them by the hour, maybe you're paying them by the job, whatever it is you're doing, but you're not deducting EI, CPP, or income tax. Those are required by law deductions that you have to take from people. And if you're not taking those, and you're just paying them cash, then you can say, well, they're a contractor, they're not an employee. Now, if they're a contractor and they make more than $30,000 a year doing that business, you're going to have to pay them GST for their service they're providing to you. And if they are a legitimate contractor, that's perfectly fine. However, if that person decides that they want to collect EI, and they say, oh, I worked there and I got paid cash, then their CRA is going to come back to you and say, hey, was this person an employee or a contractor? And then on a case-by-case basis, they're going to determine if they should have in fact been an employee. And if they decide this person was an employee, and I put some criteria up there. So one of the criteria is that how much control that person has. If you dictate to that person when they come to work, where they're supposed to be, at certain times, how they're supposed to do their job. If you give them the tools of their trade to do their job, if you pay them regardless of whether or not they perform the service at a loss, like let's say for instance that you've hired someone to put a new roof on your house, okay, you probably get a quote and an estimate. And if it costs them more, then that person's going to eat that loss. But if you're hiring, let's say, an IT person to build you a website and they just bill you out by the hour and there's no risk of loss, then that could indicate that in fact they're actually an employee. And is the work an integral part of the company? So if you need these people in order to have your business, probably the CRA is going to say that they're not contractors, they're employees. The most recent case I read about this morning when I was putting this together was the Winnipeg Ballet. So the Winnipeg Ballet had contracted for a bunch of ballerinas, okay? And then this went to a CRA ruling because the ballerinas were then wanting to be employees or classified as employees. And so the CRA said, well, being a ballerina is an integral part of what the Winnipeg Ballet is about, and so therefore these were not contractors, these were employees. So what happens? Well, if this person worked for you and you should have been taking deductions, income tax, CPP, and EI, and you didn't take those deductions, you now have to come up with all that money. And you have to come up with your share that you would have paid as the employer, and you have to come up with the employee's share. So they don't have to come up with that money, you do. And you can be fined and have a financial penalty. So it's a pretty significant cost to you when there's a dispute. So you really want to make sure that you're not just trying to save money and cut corners by having contractors when in fact these people are employees.
Quick question, can you get an advance ruling, say like this is what I'm
Yeah.
going to do,
Yep,
and
Yeah.
like,
yeah, you can contact the CRA and they'll give you an advance ruling.
Yeah,
Because they're all done on a case-by-case
Mhm.
basis. That's a good idea.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we've decided that we're going to have employees because we're all above board companies. And so you need to understand a little bit about the law. This is our country. And we have provinces. And does anybody know what the minimum wage is in BC? It's $10.25 an hour. What's the minimum wage in Alberta?
11.25.
It's $11.20. What's the minimum wage in Ontario? $11.25. Who cares, right? I don't care, but it helps to explain that employment is governed by the provinces. So each province has their own rules. Now, some people who work for federal employers like airports, radio, television, banks, they're governed by the Canada Labour Code, but probably 97% of us are governed provincially. So it's important to know that. So we are going to be part of the Alberta Labour Code. Now, I gave you this book here. This book is a guide for employers. It has a nice CD in it. It's also available online. So in the back of this book, there's all kinds of resources and things, and if you wanted to download some of these and use them as templates to create your own documents, you could do that. So we're going to go through some of the categories of this book in a minute. But what I want to tell you is with Alberta Labour and employment standards deal with minimums. So this tells you what the baseline is. So you have to do at least this. You can do more, but you can never do less. So what's the minimum wage in Alberta? $11.20. Can you pay someone $10.50? No. Can you pay them $11.50? Yes. So you have to meet the minimums. And I tell people this is the minimum standard, and you can't enter into any sort of agreement that violates that. So for example, if you wanted to enter into a contract with your employees where you're not going to pay them overtime, that is not allowed. It's like saying, hey, I tell you what, sir, if you burn down my house, I'll give you $10,000. If you say, hey, good deal, I need the money. So off he goes, he burns down my house. Then he comes to me and says, can I please have my $10,000? I say, yeah, I don't think so. Can he go to the police and make me pay the $10,000? No, he can't, because what he's done is illegal. So you can't be compensated for illegal activities. If you sell drugs and the people don't pay you, you can't go to the police and file a complaint, okay? Because what you're doing is illegal. So there's no ability to get compensated. So it works the same with employment standards. You can't ask people to do things that are below the baseline because it's not allowed. So it makes that contract void. So you want to make sure that you know what the minimums are. We're going to talk about some specific examples here. So with this, the Alberta government has excellent online resources. So if you Google Alberta Labour, then you'll be taken to this website. And the other thing you can Google is employment standards. And this will tell you what all the rules are. And at the bottom of this page, there's 4 areas. And the first one is what are all these standards and definitions referring to? So what is minimum wage? What if one of my employees is pregnant and wants to go on maternity leave? What if I don't have enough work and I need to terminate some people's employment? How do I do that? What are the rules around that? How much holiday pay do I have to pay people? So this will tell you what all of that is. Here, under the legislation, if you're looking for sort of the actual code, if you can't sleep and you have insomnia, it's a good book to read. But it tells about, you know, what the actual rule is, written in kind of legalese that's hard for most of us to understand. Education and promotion programs, they have lots of e-training, they have online videos, they have books like this. This is all free. So I phoned up, you know, the Alberta Employment Standards, and I said, can you please send me some of these books? And they said, sure, how many do you want? So you can get all of this stuff for free. Yeah.
So you might want to talk to them. They're missing page 19 to 26.
They're missing page 19 to 26? Oh yeah, they are.
That's why you got them.
Well, that must be why they're free. Holy heck. Okay, well that doesn't make any sense. I think it's a numbering error because if you look in the table of contents, overtime and overtime pay is supposed to start on page 21. So, you have 19 to 26? Oh,
No, I don't keep it.
you don't have 19 to 26? I don't either.
I don't, but I have everything in the contents, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe you gotta. No, this one doesn't have 19 to 26 either. Well, that's unfortunate. Sorry. So,
It could be just in a different order because mine is. Mine goes from 18 to 11.
from 18 to 11?
Yeah.
Well, 18 to 11.
Section 2 comes after section 2.
Oh, well, that's really super. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You do have it, they're just not in the same order.
Absolutely. I wonder if it's been pointed out.
See, that was a bad hire. It's probably somebody's cousin. Okay, so you do have the pages, but they're not in order. Sorry about that. Okay, so there are all kinds of other fact sheets that you can get, and there's also an employment standards one-page summary that takes all of the things that are listed in this table of contents here, because these are the big issues, puts it on a one-pager that's probably about this big, and by law, you are supposed to have this posted at your workplace in an area where people go, so a coffee room or a hallway. Have you seen this before?
Never.
Yeah, no. So that takes me to the point that a lot of employers who are not following the rules are not following the rules because they're evil, deviant people. They're not following the rules because they don't know what the rules are. However, it's your responsibility to know what the rules are because this is the law. So if you drive down Mayor McGrath Drive and they change the speed limit tonight to 50, and normally it's what, 60? And you get pulled over and you say to the officer, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know the speed limit changed. Does he say, no problem, just carry on? He says, well, that's too bad for you. Here's an $87 ticket. Because you're expected to know what the rule is. And so you are expected to know what these rules are. You can't say, well, I didn't know, I'm sorry. That doesn't cut it. Again, you know, you have a higher duty of care because you're the employer. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm going to go back to, let's see if I can find my way around here. Yeah, see, that's not right. There we go. Okay, so with this book, there's 3 things that you need to know. The first one we've already talked about, and that is that minimum standards can't be avoided. So rather than read this whole book, if you have this handout here, this is actually a brochure, so it's supposed to be folded. Of course, I photocopied it upside down, another bad hire. So if you actually start on the page, it doesn't have the guy on it. That's the front. So this talks about the most common areas of employment. So it talks about minimum wages. It talks about pay, when you have to pay people. So there are rules around, you know, how long you can wait after somebody's completed a pay period before you pay them. Hours of work. People cannot work more than 12 consecutive hours in a day. So if you've got people working split shifts, that's fine. But if it exceeds 12 consecutive hours, even though total number of hours work is less than that, that becomes overtime. Excuse me, there are ways to calculate overtime, so it's based on 44 hours a week or more than 8 hours a day, whichever is greater. So you would keep records around that. Vacations, what's the minimum vacation period in Alberta for all hires? 2 weeks. So it works out to 4%. So just think about the cost of vacations for you as an employer is 2% a week. So if your employees are not going to be accruing vacation time that they can take off, then you would add that 4% onto their check. You don't have to add it onto every check. When I had the grocer, we paid vacation twice a year. So July 1st and December 1st or something. Then that's when people would collect their 4%. So you have to pay them at some point, but it doesn't have to be every pay period, and it does have to be within a year of them earning it. Termination, so this is your question earlier about the 3 months. So the 3-month window is the try-on period. So someone can work for you for 3 months as long as you're within your 90 days. If you don't like them, it's not working out, it's just something, you can end that relationship, no cost to you. Now you can extend probation as well. You can have an employment contract that says that your probation period is 6 months. I know at the college, faculty members, their probation period is 2 years because they figure it kind of takes that long in order to have enough cycles of people to know how you're doing. So you can extend the period, but if you don't have an employment contract, then the default will come into play, which is 3 months, okay? If you're going to have a service type business where you're going to be open on holidays and so on and so forth, you're going to want to know if I have to pay people holiday pay. This will tell you that. If you flip this over, you've got staff going on maternity leave. Women having babies, giving birth, get more leave than adopted parents or dads. And why is that? Moms know why. Because we had that baby, and have you ever done that? It's a lot of work. So the extra 15 weeks that women get is part of that physical recovery. Compassionate care leave, this is a new type of leave that people are eligible for. And then also the employment of young people. So we have labor law in Alberta that says kids can't work unless they're a certain age. And what's the minimum age for employees?
16.
No, 12.
Oh,
Welcome to Alberta.
Wow.
Yeah, 12. So if you are 12,
Is that different for family businesses and like farms specifically?
Anymore.
not
Yeah.
anymore for farms. Because God forbid we want any of those employees to have any rights. With 12, there are rules though. So for instance, if you're 12, you have to have parental consent to work. And you can only work 2 hours a day on a school day and 8 hours a day on a non-school day. So you think, oh, well, that's not so bad. Well, actually it is, because if you do the math, that's 20 hours a week. So, and then you can't work past certain hours of the day. And then if you're older, you can't work in certain occupations. So for instance, if you're under the age of 16, you can't work like in a retail 7-Eleven, type environment and past 9 o'clock and so on and so forth. So if you have a business and you're going to be employing young people, then you do need to have, you do need to know what the rules are, okay? So this comes in poster form, and this is the poster that's supposed to be up at your place of employment. So you can order it for free. Hopefully they get it in the right order, and have that up at your business. So you can't avoid the minimum standards. So anything that is on the employment standards code as a minimum standard, you have to do at least that. You can always do more, but you can never do less. The other challenge that people often get wrong is the second point up there about salaries. Sometimes you'll pay people by the month. So you'll say, oh, you make $3,000 a month. So if the person is making $3,000 a month, then you still have to back out the number of hours that they're working in that month, and they still have to make more than minimum wage. So if they're working, let's say, lots of overtime, that's minimum payment of time and a half, and it has to be more than minimum wage. So you can't get around it by saying, oh, you get paid salary, so therefore you're not entitled to overtime. That doesn't wash. The other thing that you'll hear from some employers is, oh, it's a seasonal business, so therefore the rules don't apply to us. Yeah, no. I don't know why the rules wouldn't apply to you, but there are some companies and situations that are exempt. And if you look in the back of this book, on page 89, if you have page 89 numbered correctly. It says common exceptions. These are the exemptions. So if you're not on this list as an exempted business or type of job, then you don't, you're not an exempt. Now, the other thing I should tell you is that this was printed in 2013, this book, and as this kind gentleman has pointed out to us, farm and ranch workers, second from the bottom, are now covered by employment standards. So they never used to be. So that line is actually wrong. So in the new publication, that won't be there anymore. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do next is we're going to move on and talk about payroll. But is there anything in this table of contents that is of a question that you might have, or any topical area that is of particular interest to you? Yes.
Just a quick note, even with the contract, where even if it's legitimate, as an employer, still responsible for the WCB as well.
Yes.
And I think that was news to me. Like you're just paying them, but if they don't have WCB, then you're responsible for them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So WCB is a requirement by law, and the employer pays 100% of that coverage. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I have a friend that works in a certain company.
Everybody has a friend.
But they have some, I used to work there, and they have some sketchy accounting, and I think they're screwing him for vacation pay. Is there a way that you can set up an audit or something like that?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, for sure. You file a complaint with these people, and if you look in the back here on page 57, if it's numbered properly for you, talks about the process, and there you can anonymously make a complaint, so you don't have to reveal your name, because sometimes people are reluctant to do that.
I think he's scared to say anything, and,
Yeah.
and I think I'm pretty sure.
No, he shouldn't be. He should just file an anonymous complaint. And because employment standards does do audits, so it's like being investigated by the CRA, like sometimes they'll just randomly pick people. So it wouldn't be unusual for an employer to be audited, so he doesn't need to worry that they would target him. Sorry, sir, I'm going to get this question here. Do you have a question?
I answered it myself
Oh.
by reading.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, you're saying that they could do it anonymously. When you go to labor standards, a part of the resolution project or process is you sit down with the employer so that the three of you can try to come to an arrangement. So
Yep.
sure, you can make an anonymous complaint, but they're still going to know it was you when you have to sit down and try to resolve the complaint.
Well, it depends on what that is, right? Like in this case, he's talking about, he's feeling that the holiday pay isn't being properly assigned to people. So that becomes a payroll problem that you would have to, you need to produce the records. And then if your records indicate that you aren't paying properly, then that can be resolved and everybody that applies to would get paid out. You wouldn't necessarily have to have that, but if it's an issue with one person, like, if I'm being terminated and I want extra severance, then yes.
But in a situation like, let's say, a particular company works you 7 days a week for a month and a half with no overtime, you take it to the labor board, they're going to expect you to sit down with them, and there's usually threats of blackballs and things like that.
Yeah.
So,
I would
ways
say
to get around that?
you could provide your evidence confidentially. I think they are sensitive to the fact that people are afraid and a little bit nervous about that. Because, the law says you can't terminate an employee, but as you know, they can make your life difficult. So, yeah. I think I would ask that be avoided. And depending on what the circumstances are, that may be possible, or it may not. But if you're nervous about that, you'd want to clarify that at the beginning. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions on particular topics? Okay, good. Let's move on then. And let's start working. We have 3 slides left. So when you have employees, you have to keep records. And how long do you need to keep those records for?
7 years.
3, only 3 years. So that's the statute of limitations. And the next question is, what kind of records do I need to keep? The book tells you on page 10. If you open the book, it tells you all the records that you need to keep. So it's a very good idea to set up your systems to start doing this right away, so that you're not, trying to go back and figure out how much you paid people and when they worked overtime and so on and so forth. And the most important thing for employees is what? Why do they work for you? Money. I mean, sure, they love you, but they also want to get paid. So on the next page, it talks about what you have to put on their statement of earnings or their pay stub. So when you give employees a pay stub, there are legal requirements of what the content of that must be. So you have to tell them, what is the pay period that they're being paid for. Is it January 1st to 31st? Is it the 1st to the 15th? Is it the 8th to the 20th? Whatever that is. The number of regular hours that they worked, plus the number of overtime hours, what their wage rate is. So if they get paid monthly salary or if they get paid hourly, that has to be listed on there. And their deductions have to be listed as well. So if you're taking deductions for CPP and EI and income tax, maybe they're paying for a uniform, all of that has to be listed on their pay stub. And the last question is, how do I know what deductions to take? The CRA is happy to tell you. Now, what you need to remember is that the CRA is your friend. They're pretty archaic there. I've had lots of dealings with the CRA. They are actually the biggest government department. Did you know that? They have 45,000 employees. You think, well, that's some employees. But in Canada, there are over 1 million businesses, so 1,107,540, according to the 2012 Statistics Canada information. And of those, 98.2%, are small businesses. Now, Industry Canada defines a small business as 99 or less employees. So most of those businesses are small businesses. Now, when you add those million businesses to the 26 million plus people that are filing income tax that the CRA needs to be responsible for, 45,000 staff doesn't actually seem like too many. So again, CRA is somebody that wants their pound of flesh from you, and they have all kinds of deadlines and rules, and you have to follow the rules. And they have automated penalties that come into place, so if you're late, they automatically penalize you for that. And then you have to try to get that fixed, and it's very difficult because they don't have a plethora of staff. And they don't have an office here in Lethbridge anymore that is an office that you can go up to the counter and ask for some assistance. They don't take public inquiries. So with the CRA, they try to be user-friendly, and I would say for the most part they are. And what they will do is they'll give you all kinds of good information on how you should be doing your payroll and how you should be taking deductions. Now, if you have staff, these two sheets here, one says Alberta and one says Canada Revenue Agency. These are two pieces of information that you have to collect from every single employee. And what you want them to identify is how much income tax you're going to take off their check. So most employees claim single, and so they just take the basic exemption, but if they have dependents, they might claim at a higher rate. Or they might say, you know, I'm always paying at the end of the year, so I want you to take an extra $20 off my check, and they would put that on this form, okay? So these are available on the CRA site, and each province would have their own. Obviously, there's an Alberta one tax you pay, and then you'll also pay federal tax. So that's information that you have to get from your employees. Now, back to, too many gadgets up here. There's only 3 things that you need to know about payroll. The first one is that as a business, did you guys talk about getting a business number, a BN number? If you're gonna be a business, you have to get a BN number. So if you go to Revenue Canada and you Google, new business, starting a business, there's actually a checklist there, and it'll tell you everything you need to do. And you apply online for your business number. So they'll ask you what kind of business you're in, they'll ask you for that code, and you do have to pick a code, and you can only pick one. So you pick that code, it'll ask about, how many employees are you gonna have, how are you gonna pay people, and so on and so forth. It's pretty standard information. You can change it later if you end up doing something different, and you'll get a business number. Then if you're gonna have employees, you have to also get an employee payroll number, and that becomes your payroll account, and that's where you're gonna make your remittances to. So when you take money off people's checks and you have to send it to the CRA, you do it under that account. You can do most of that online, but what I found as a small business was that you have to do it through your personal banking. You can't do it through your business banking account. It's the craziest system. So sometimes you can mail them in, or you can go into a chartered bank and you can pay at your bank. Now it's expensive to have employees, because when you take that money off their check, CPP, for instance, is 4.95%. So you make $1,000, I'm going to take almost 5% of that off as a CPP deduction, and then Revenue Canada says, send us that money, and you, Mrs. Employer, you also send us 5%. So 10% goes to CPP. EI is not as high, CPP is the highest, and so with EI, I think it's 1.8, it might be 1.6. 1.4 is the number of times in addition that you send as the employer. So if you take the amount off, let's say it's $20, then you would pay 1.4 times that as the employer contribution. That's why it costs you so much money to have employees, because you have to pay an employer share of these donations. Or donations, yeah, that's how I use it. Taxes, donations. So the last thing I want to show you is just how to use the payroll calculator. You can do this yourself. You do not have to hire an accountant or a bookkeeper to do your payroll. It's very straightforward, and we're going to do one right now, and I'll show you how easy it is. As soon as I find the payroll calculator. Was it at the top?
Yeah, at the very top. It's highlighted blue, payroll deductions, online calculator.
Oh yeah, there it is right there. Thank you. Okay, so if you don't know, there are tables and you can look it up and so on and so forth, but this is actually the easiest way to do this. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a business and we're going to have some employees. So we'll just say that we pay our employees a salary, and we are going to be a wonderful employer. Oh, that's the employee. So they'll be wonderful employee. Susie Wonderful, maybe? I don't know. And the employer will be 123 Gadget. Doesn't really matter. And we are going to be in Alberta. And how often do you want to pay this person? Monthly? 12 pay periods a year. And when do they get paid next? February 29th? Okay. Come on.
Once every 4 years.
They get paid once every 4 years?
29th.
Yeah, they get paid once every 4 years. Okay, so you would fill that in. And how much do you pay them? Well, let's say we pay them a salary, so let's pay them $4,000 a month. And we're not going to give any vacation pay. And then you just tick off what's relevant to you. So they don't get any bonus pay or anything like that. It'll ask you some questions about whether you give them a housing allowance and so on and so forth. Most of the time these boxes are all going to be no. And then you say next. Okay, so this is the information that you get from this sheet here that you've asked them to fill out. And so you're going to put that information in here. As I said, most people will be 1, so we'll just pretend that that's the case. Let's say that they always have to pay, so they want an additional $20 of income tax taken off their check. They're not CPP exempt, so if you have an employee who's over 65, for instance, they'd be CPP exempt, so you wouldn't deduct for that, but that's not the case. So we're in month number 2, right? So they made $4,000 last month. So you can keep these. What I used to do is I used to print them off after I did the payroll, and then I would just keep them in the employee's file. And then next month, or the next pay period, I would just use this information as the last pay period, okay? So you just keep a kind of ongoing record, and then you just add it in. It's very, very easy to do. So last month they made $4,000, so because it was January, so that's the year to date. I don't know what the contributions for CPP will be, so I'm going to guess. EI, same thing. They'll ask you about this. Now, the reason that they ask you this question is because once you hit a threshold of income, you don't have to pay CPP and EI anymore. That's why those of you that are in higher income earning jobs, like it's different depending on if it's CPP or EI, but I think it's around 54,000 or 60,000. Once you hit that number, so if you hit that number in like June, that's your income that you've made so far, then after June you don't pay any more CPP or EI. So that's why you need to know what the maximum is, because then you stop taking it off. Now, if you keep taking it off by mistake, at tax time, you'll identify it as an overpayment, and then the person will get that money back. Okay, EI premiums to date, I have no idea, so let's say 20 bucks. Okay. So then we calculate, and look what it tells me. It tells me everything. So it's telling me what my wages are. It's telling me what my deductions are for tax. And then it tells me how much I need to cut my check for. And if I go down to the bottom of the page, I can look up how much I have to send in now as the employer. And oh my gosh, look at that. I have to remit, why isn't this working? $1,200. So paying you $4,000, I now have to send Revenue Canada $1,200. Most of that's what I took off your check, but the rest of it is what I have to contribute as an employer. So again, it's not cheap having employees, so you want to make sure that you're making good hiring decisions. Okay, and that's how you can do your payroll. And that's how I did my payroll. And I know I'm not very good with math. I have checks, therefore I must have money, right? And so I was able to do this and do T4s and everything online. It's very simple, so don't be afraid to do it yourself and save yourself a lot of money. And again, if you get it wrong, Revenue Canada fixes it when you do T4s, okay? The best advice I can give you is don't miss the deadlines. So if you miss the deadlines, oh my gosh, they're like ruthless, ruthless. And that's it. So if you have, if you're not sure, remember it's your job to find out. You're the most knowledgeable person, and you're the one that's going to be liable if you get it wrong. Okay, so you're all anxious to go home. It's a long time to sit, isn't it? 3 hours. And you don't even give them snacks?
No.
Wow. I protest if I were you people.
Thank you so much, Sharon. That was awesome. CRA is, they're either your best friend, but
Yeah.
do not. So many people that was like, I have an accountant, he has a system. Nobody has a system that beats CRA. And when you are on their bad side, they trump everybody. They'll go after anything to get that money, and especially when you're talking about your employees' pay, they are very, very critical on your employees' pay, definitely. So that's it for today. We're going to be meeting again next week, and I'm just going to try and switch over to my other one real quick here. Where we're going to be talking a little bit more about marketing. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about a SWOT analysis. And we're also going to be talking about a marketing plan. We have some great presenters in next week. We have a gentleman that does the marketing for Clear Sky Radio, which is 94.1 and 98.1. And we have a manager from the Lethbridge Herald as well. So these are two guys that know marketing. Whether it's internet, whether it's print, whether it's through the radio, they are going to have a whole lot of knowledge for you guys. So make sure you come armed with some questions. And again, if you guys have questions, don't forget to email me. Either of those email addresses work, or you can give me a call at the office. That's what we're there for. Also, I need the 2 sign-in sheets that I had sending around. If you guys did not sign those sheets, make sure your name's on them. Other than that, you're good to go. Week 4 is done.